Hello everybody, welcome back to the Norries podcast. Before we get into it there, we just want to remind people that we're supported through Danny Donovan at quickminutes.com.
Yeah, Danny's a very good friend of both myself and James. He comes from the north side as well, and he grew up locally, and he's been a massive supporter of the podcast and both myself and James since we actually began. And he has his own company called Quick Minutes now, and
quickminutes.com is a meeting management application for semi-formal and formal meetings. And look, if you want to know more about that, quickminutes.com, and supporting Danny's supporting us. So if you're interested in that, check him out and enjoy the rest of the podcast. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Norries podcast. I am your host James and I'm joined by my good friend Timmy Long.
Hi everyone.
Ron is on the deck. Say hi, Ron. Hi, Ron. The mother of the guest, Sharon, is in the audience. Say hi, Sharon. And our guest today is Jessica Ní Mhaoláin, and the topics we are going to discuss is visual impairments, hysterectomies, education, and everything in between.
Yeah.
But before we get into it, to ease it in, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from? How we interacted with you first day was you were at the Pride of Cork Awards where we received the award. You did and we did, and a lot of other great people did, and not so great people. But it was a good night, wasn't it?
Yeah, I loved it. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
It was really, really good.
So people understand why we got the award because of the podcast and all that. But will you tell us a little bit about how the award came about for you?
Yeah, I will, lads. So I suppose people probably know me in a few different areas. So most people would have had like interaction with me a few years ago when I was getting my master's. So I'd done 4 years of a degree in UCC and then I went back to do a master's in government. And the night before I got it, this story broke like on like the Examiner or whatever about, I think it was like 2 or 3 SNAs, which are special needs assistants, being taken off kids that obviously needed them in a school in the north side. And me and Mum were just like, we were reading through the story and we're sitting down just chatting, and we were saying that like, do you know, God, like what would have happened without my SNA? I wouldn't have learned how to read and write. I wouldn't have been able to participate properly in school. Wouldn't have been able to do my junior cert. Wouldn't have got as far as leaving cert. Wouldn't have been able to do my leaving cert, and I definitely wouldn't have made it to college. So we were just chatting about that, and I was like, do you know what? Now I'm going to put a post up on Facebook, like, because this is disgraceful. So I just wrote this post and kind of said, like, you know, you don't understand, like, what a key out of poverty education is. And that, like, if, like, basically how an SNA worked for me was they were like my eyes in a classroom because my eyes don't work. Like, I've been registered blind since I was born. I have a little bit of sight, but not much. And that's kind of, like, I just couldn't fathom how someone would think it's acceptable to take a sense or like a support like that off a child in a classroom. But like I put up on Facebook that afternoon, and I think by that evening, like, we were all kind of joking and saying, oh, you're after going viral, because I had like 400 shares or something. Like by the next day it was up to like thousands. So that's how people would know me. Like I ended up on the Examiner the day that I graduated. It was front page of the Examiner, so there was an awful lot of slagging, like.
But
Congratulations.
I think that's fantastic.
And like that's how most people would know me, like.
Because your voice, but there's behind that, there was a purpose to that story happening. This is where I'm coming from here.
Yeah.
Because you have a very inspirational story in one sense, you know, your education journey and your mental health journey.
Yeah.
How you came out of that, and you know. So can you bring us a little back and just tell us how it was like for you, maybe growing up in school and at home and the streets?
Yeah, like I suppose it's kind of hard now to think back that far because I just turned 30.
Oh God, help us.
Yes, I know, yeah.
A young one, like. But you're from Ballyfihan, is it?
Yeah, so we lived in Ballyfihan.
There's something about Ballyfihan for the Norries. Sorry to interrupt, you know, but do you know when
Here we are now.
Do you know when I'm going out to Turner's Cross sometimes, for to watch the Cork City, sometimes it's very busy, so I'll drive into Ballyfihan. Yeah. Ballyfihan looks all the estates look the exact same. and I'm walking. No, if I drive 2 minutes from Turner's Cross into Ballyvahan, I need Google Maps to find my way back out of it.
But that's how I feel about Far and Reese, so it's kind of the same.
Yeah.
Sort of the hills.
I actually don't know the difference between Ballyvahan and Ballyvalan. I actually don't know which one is where.
You win that one.
I actually genuinely don't know. I leave it at that. I leave you continue, but I do get confused with the names of the two places because they're so similar.
So what was it like growing up for you? Like when you said that you were born with the visual impairment, is it like how far can you see? Can you read?
I can if it's very up close to me. So like I can see the two of you there now, but I can't actually differentiate between your faces. So if one of you made a face at me or like gave me the finger or whatever, I actually wouldn't see it.
But can you see like a silhouette of us?
I can see a silhouette of you, and I know like that like your silhouettes are different, if that makes sense. So that's how I know that like Timmy's on this side and James is on this side.
I won't test out that finger thing anyway.
No, please don't. you wouldn't believe how many people walk up to me and say, "Okay, how many fingers am I holding up?" It's the most irritating thing ever.
What was it like as a child?
See, the thing about it, right, was I didn't know any different. Like, I have friends who have visual impairments, and they went, like, if they're people that, like, would have went blind, like, overnight, or they had a disease where they lost their sight slowly. I didn't. So I've only ever been able to see what I can see. Do you know that kind of way? So for me, it never made a difference. And like mom and dad, like they would have told me that I was visually impaired, obviously, but like how much of that can a 6-year-old really kind of understand? I just knew that I couldn't really see things. But like I remember there was another girl in my class with glasses and I thought she couldn't see things either, like, because like it was just the innocence of a child, like. So
can you see colours?
Yeah, I can see colours. It's a bit like, the way I explain it to people now is, so there's kind of two sides to it. So there's like the vision impairment, which is like, it's like, do you know if you're doing like, do you know if you're reading the chart in the doctor's office? So like I can only read the top line, which is one letter. And I generally know that letter is normally either A or Q. So even if I can't see it, I guess
you were sussed
out. But like that's all I can see. So it's basically like kind of once you get kind of an arm's length away from me, things go blurry. So like I work on silhouettes then, or like if I'm not working on silhouettes, I'll work on colours. Do you know, that kind of way? Like, and that's kind of how I manage. But then I suppose the other thing is I also have an involuntary movement in my eyes, which I don't know if you've caught it already, but they just move from side to side. Like it makes me look really shifty to get into clubs. I used to never be able to get into clubs when I was a bit younger because like they always thought I was on something. Which like, to be fair, look, they're not going to know. Like, it gets you to the top of an A&E list very fast, so I'll say that much. But
and you know, like, is the condition is there a name for the condition that you have for your eyesight? Was it hereditary or?
So it's called, this is a mouthful now, it's called oculocutaneous albinism. So oculo is eyes and cutaneous is skin, so it affects my skin as well. Like I can't tan at all. Like the night that I met you, I was covered head to toe in black magic tan. Like that, do you know what I mean? I don't tan, like sunbeds don't work on me. Like we went to Lanzarote there recently and I had to get a spray tan before I left. And I came back then and I was born, like, do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like you wouldn't believe, like I burn from reflection. And I'd have to be very careful with my skin as well because you would have a higher chance of getting things like skin cancer. But like that's just something that I'm aware of. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone checks themselves for moles and things at this stage. So like it affects, so like I think like obviously both my parents carry the gene, but they're not affected by it. And obviously then the gene pool in Ireland is so small that it actually, like, it's a rare enough condition anywhere else, but in Ireland there's actually a high enough rate of it.
Do you know, we had a guest on a couple of weeks ago, cystic fibrosis, she had.
Yeah.
It's similar to what you're talking about there. The two parents have it. It's rare in the world, but in Ireland it seems to be way more common than the rest of the world.
What was the name behind it?
Cystic fibrosis.
Yeah, remember she told us
Celtic disease or something like that.
Yeah.
It's common in Celtic countries like Ireland, Scotland and Wales. So what about when you're coming into your teenage years?
that was hard now. Do you know, like, I suppose in school I was lucky because I went to, like, it was a small enough school and it was an Irish school. So,
what was
like,
the name of the school?
Gael School in Tylegnafa. It's up in Torreytop Road up in Ballyfihan.
Are you, can you speak Irish fluently?
Yeah, I'm a Gael Gore. Now,
Brilliant.
I'm much better at listening than I am at talking it, purely because I just lost it after school. Like, do you know what I mean? Because you just don't use it as much. Like, I use it at work with the few that would be Gael Gores, but, like, I'm not hardly as fluent as I was. But, like, school was grand because I suppose, like that now, like, mum and dad never really they told me I was different, but, like,
You didn't feel different.
I
though.
didn't, because they treated me the same as my brother. I still learned how to roller skate badly. I still learned how to cycle, and I took the legs off a table in the kitchen when I was about 8, and I've never been allowed to forget about it. Like, so I still learned everything normal. Now, I will say I wasn't able to obviously kind of read properly, and I really wasn't able to write properly until I was nearly 9 or 10. And that was purely because they teach you how to do that stuff on a blackboard. I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
And would glasses have any effect then? Jessica?
So I'd have a little bit more definition with glasses, and, like, I do use them at work now because I don't want to strain my eyes too much. But, like, they wouldn't. I mean, I was at the top of a class and I was still too far away from the blackboard. Like, what I would use in secondary school is, like, it's like a little telescope that I would use, and obviously I could see things then. But, like, I didn't have that in primary school until very late. Do you know what I mean? Until I had... Excuse me, I think I just burped into the microphone.
You're okay.
That
is. That's the fizzy water.
I know.
No, that's the coffee I had.
Yeah, I'm trying to cut you on a deal here, but I'm trying to give you an excuse to use it.
But yeah, so, like, do you know, it was only until I got the SNA that I was able to kind of start really properly working in the classroom, because, like, I was frustrated, but I'm very smart. Do you know what I mean? So when someone gave me the same equal opportunity in the classroom that everyone else had, I was able to keep up with people no problem.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But I was so cross with myself because I couldn't understand why I couldn't learn the same as everyone else. Do you know, that kind of way? And, like, even when I had the SNA in the classroom, there was no big hoo-ha, there was no big deal about it. It was just like, oh, Jessica and someone else that was in my class, like, we shared the SNA, and it was like, oh, the two of them just, like, have, like, an extra helper. Like, there was no kind of looking at each other weird or none of that. Do you know what I mean? So it was just normal to me.
Was there
like,
ever any bullying?
Yeah, there was.
When you were smally, or was it in secondary school?
Both. Like, when I was small, like, and do you know what? Do you know what the sad thing about it was? It was more from the parents than it was the kids.
You're joking me.
I wasn't invited to a birthday party when I was about 7 or 8. I think it was after my communion, so I must have been about 8. I wasn't invited to a birthday party because the mothers of the child that was having the birthday party thought, like, what would we do with her? And I'm not being funny, that has stayed with me for years.
That's very hard. That's...
Do you know, like, and it was a friend of mine, it was her mum stood up for me. I don't even think my mum even knew about it.
Thank God.
Do you know what I mean? But it was a friend of mine, her mum stood up for me and was like, you know, you can't treat her like that. She's the same as everyone else. But it was that old kind of, that notion in Ireland that, like, if you have any kind of disability, it must mean that there's something wrong with your mind. They can't, like, separate the fact that you mightn't be able to see, or you mightn't be able to hear, or you might be able to walk, from the fact that you could be, like, you know, very intellectually impaired in some way. But still, do you know what, actually, that's not even a good enough reason not to invite a child to another child's party. I'm sorry.
When I asked you that question, I probably could have had a good guess that there was bullying went on, because children tend to pick out on people that are different. And when children are younger, you could kind of excuse it, they don't know any better. But for when an adult does it, there's absolutely no excusing that. Honestly, no, like, I don't care what's going on in your life or what your background is or whatever. You don't exclude children from parties like that, because it's just not right. But anyway, you didn't let it hold you back.
No. And
you drove on with your life. What happened when you left school? Did you go straight into college, or?
So, like, I went through school, like, again, now this SNA situation, like, I had no SNA until I was in junior start year. So, like, we were actually, when we went back and looked at my marks when I was in 5th year, I think you could like tell straight away the years that I had an SNA and the years I didn't. Because the years I didn't have an SNA, I was getting letters home. I was like failing. Like I remember one of the teachers telling me like, oh, you need to pass down to, I needed honours level biology to get into the college course I wanted. And they cut my SNA hours, so I didn't have someone to cover me in the class. So I obviously couldn't partake in the class because I couldn't see. And the teacher was like, oh no, like she's not able for it. She just needs to drop down. And we actually, Mum and Dad got me a grinds teacher for like two hour slots every week for the whole of 6th year. And like I was able to keep it up and I got my college course. But like
there was no
fighting to get it. Yeah. Like there was no understanding from the teacher's point of view. He just thought I was not stupid, but he didn't think I was up to it.
He was basing his ideas around the other students within the classroom. I completely relate to what you're talking about. He was basing, but I think things are changing, James, aren't they? I think as a society and the education board and everybody involved in education are going to start to have to look at each individual child and see how can they give that child the best education that they deserve, number one, you know, and they need, number two, and it has to meet their ability, because education is something that is absolutely vital to each and every one of us for us to flourish within society and ourselves and our own personal development and growth. Yeah. Because it gives us an understanding of ourselves or how we think and how we feel, you know, wording. Because from my own experience, it wasn't until I got educated I started to understand how and why I ticked the way I did, you know. So I think education needs to be looked at a little bit more in depth, and each individual child, it should be there should be like a roadmap in how to teach every child.
I can see kind of similarities between yourself and Timmy experience in terms of like. And
I was actually saying that to someone the other day. I identify an awful lot with your story, except like we both kind of went different ways with it.
But you know what? When you said there, like you were well able to learn, you just hadn't got the support to facilitate it. Like your brain and Timmy's brain was firing on all cylinders. Not all wrong with the brain. Yeah. Timmy had dyslexia, you had the visual impairment. He had to learn it in a different way. Yeah. But the brain was fully functioning. Could have been the brightest brains in the whole class. But it's just, that's why it's important that, like what we're doing with the walk on Saturday, you know, we're doing a charity walk for raise money for children to get assessments so that they're not left down the back of the class, because there's so much potential being lost for people there, you know. Yeah. What was the leaving cert like for you? Tough.
Leaving cert. God, that takes me back. It was horrific. And I've said it since, it's the worst exam you'll ever do in your whole life. I don't know why it hasn't been changed. Because it's all about like memory, and like just because you can remember something, that doesn't make you the smartest person in the room. Do you know, that kind of way? Like obviously, like I totally understand that you have to measure it, but measure someone at their level. Do you know, that kind of way?
Yeah, I think this is my understanding of it. I think they should change it completely and stop it. Yeah, and maybe judge each individual child through their last 2 years, 5th and 6th year. And how their work ethic is, how hard they work, their progress, their attitude, instead of, like, you might have this one guy who has a photographic memory and looks at something once, James, you know what I'm talking about here, and he knows it off by heart. And you might have me, who has read the same article he has read 50 times and it still doesn't sink in. Yeah. And I'm getting stressed every single time I read it, because I know it's not going to lodge inside my head for when I need to walk into the exam and write it down. You know. But if you're in school and the teachers and everybody involved in the education system can see that individual really, really working hard, I think it actually makes more sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. But it just goes to show like that the importance it is to have SNAs, and there'll be a lot of SNAs listening to the podcast because, you know, the nature of what we talk about, we're huge advocates for education. And education is somebody's right, and you should be allowed to have a full education, no matter what your learning difficulties may be.
Yeah.
You know, the support should be there. We're out working, you know, we're paying our taxes and PRSI and all these things, and a solid education should be a basic requirement for every citizen in the country, and Ukrainians and everybody else that wants to come over.
Because it's up to you what you do with it after that. But at least if you have a solid foundation, the world is your oyster then.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? Whether you can see, whether you can't see, whether you can't hear, whether you can't walk, whether you like have mental health issues, whether you have problems going on at home that don't allow you to properly concentrate. Because all this goes on in the middle of like kids in puberty as well, which is not the easiest thing to go through either. Do you know what I mean?
Speaking of which, and I know your mother was in the audience, so I won't try to embarrass you, but what was life like as a teenager and boys and stuff like that? Was it difficult to mix with boys? And
yeah, it was. Like I wanted to be the same as the rest of the girls, and I was, and I had friends, right? But I had like maybe 4 really close friends, and like 2 of them I still have today. Do you know, that kind of way? It was
what's
always
their names?
Like
what's their names? Your friends?
One of them is actually called Jessica.
Hi, Jessica.
So there's Jessica and Jessica. We call each other number 1, number 2.
Hi, Jessica, number 2.
And another friend I would have had like kind of the whole time through school is probably April Kelly. I'd say one of the girls that I was in primary school with. We stayed in contact the whole time.
Hi, April Kelly.
Hi, April.
So like, do you know, that's just kind of where I was like.
Good to have friends like that, isn't it?
It is, because like they're the friends that like I could pick up the phone to them in the morning and just be like, I'm in trouble, or do you know, that kind of way. Now I will say like Mum and Dad had a really tight leash on us. Pure helicopter parents, sorry now.
Do you know what I seen from your mother from the moment I saw her? It was like this guardian angel behind you with the wings out and just on protection mode consistently, like.
Yeah.
And I could see how much love that she had for you, like, and like I do you know what,
like a lioness
I
protecting
would
her
actually
cub.
fear for the fella that ever does give you shit down the line, if I'm going to be honest, because he will have to deal with mammy, like.
Sharon will go full belly for hand on and you don't want to go full belly for hand on nobody, like.
Oh, you'll be in trouble. Let's just keep it like that.
The last belly for hand person we had on the podcast was the Taoiseach. He sat in that chair next to you, and he'd be very proud of you.
Exactly.
Because he's a huge advocate for education too. Yeah. He's pro belly for hand.
He was the one that brought in the SNAs first.
I know,
day.
that's right.
He
said it to us here.
Like, he had the foresight to do that, like.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Look at
Now,
the difference.
we totally differ politically, like, but like it's the same idea. Like, you have, do you know, like he was the education minister that brought in the SNAs, and like, like I think they're slowly kind of working out the cracks in it now. I think I do think it did take a long time to do that, but like at least it's happening.
Are SNAs only in public schools?
As far as I know, they are. But you see, I only ever went to public schools. I never went to a private school. But as far as I know, they are. It's just something within the kind of gift of the Department of Education and the National Council for Special Education.
What did you do after you finished primary or secondary school?
So I went straight into college.
Which college?
UCC.
Fucking fair play, cha. What course did you go into?
See, this is funny now because I did a Bachelor's of Science in Public Health and Health Promotion.
Oh, brilliant.
Which, like, the only reason I'm laughing is because when I went into college, I took up smoking. And here I was, like, doing the smoking cessations.
Or
there used to be a group of us in the class. We were like the tearaways, like.
But it was probably the first bit of freedom you had.
See, it was. And like, do you know, I'm glad my parents were kind of on protection mode with us, because it kept me out of the trouble that I would have gotten into. And I can see that now. I couldn't see it at the time. But like, I think if we didn't have that, if me and my brother, like if we didn't have that kind of helicopter parenting over us, I don't know about him, but I think there was fierce potential for me to go off the rails there, because I was a bit like you, Timmy. I was just so frustrated in the classroom the whole time.
Just didn't, nothing really.
And
clicked.
I was like, what's the point?
Was the university very difficult for you, so?
It was the opposite. UCC was so different. It
Did
was
you get
like,
the right supports?
yeah, from
They
day
have them
one.
up there. They're very good.
It works totally different. It's like now it could be a bit different now, but I know when I went in, it was like they assess you and they meet your needs. Whereas in like primary and secondary, it was a case of like, this is what we can offer you. You'll have to figure out how to bridge the gap. Do you know, that kind of way? So it was different, like, but like, for once I kind of wasn't worrying about asking for something because I wasn't afraid someone was going to say no, or that I'd have to be like assessed for a week. And like, I remember when the CNOs used to come into the classrooms in secondary school and they'd assess you for like the hours of SNAs that you'd get. And like, if you were too good, if you were learning too well, you got your hours cut. Do you know, whereas in UCC, if you said to them like, no, I'm really struggling with this, they could offer you equipment, they could offer you a person to take the notes, or they could offer you grinds. So it just depended on which way you thought would be best.
The thing with the universities is like, UCC is a very rich organisation with over 20,000 students and a huge amount of resources. I remember when I was over there, I remember seeing, do you know, No Limbs, No Limits, Joanna.
Yeah, she was in college when I was there.
Yeah, no arms and legs to me. But she booting around the college campus. One of the smart. She did a master's in criminology. She works for Red FM in the sports. She's a sports journalist. No, mad. But like, there's no real reason. And there's courses over there. You'd see people with Down syndrome going in and graduating.
Yeah, they do like the life skills courses and the like UCC Plus and all that. Like,
yeah, but there's a huge amount. Like, if there's people listening to this podcast, the point I want to make is it doesn't matter what your level of ability is or what you perceive your level of ability is, there's a course there for you and there's supports there for you.
Yeah.
If that's a tutor, I had a tutor myself.
Yeah, same as me. So
I got grants every year. Every year I got €800 and a Christmas week student assistance fund for poor students.
Yeah.
You know, that helped me get through the Christmas.
Yeah. They had that in the MTU as well.
Yeah.
If a student was struggling, they just had to show that they were struggling, and that's how I was able to pay for my own assessment for the educational psychologist to get my own diagnosis, because I had two kids and a wife at home, and
you didn't have the money for it.
We hadn't got it, and this just taught me to apply for it, and they were very, very, very helpful, and that's even the extra time for me.
Yeah.
No, I never finished an exam. I never finished all the questions or anything like that, but even the extra 20 minutes on top of the 2 hours for an exam, it was vital. It
takes the pressure off, doesn't it?
It was vital. You know, I'd still get 2.5 questions. Don't know whether the 4 but or the 3 or whatever, but I was happy with that because I knew I'd just get over that line.
Yeah.
You know, but if it was a practical exam, then I was coming up with 95s and hundreds in my making roofs and stuff.
You were flying it,
I was flying because it was visual stuff.
Yeah.
But when it come to the memory stuff, then it was like,
forget about it.
I used to get so stressed, James. Seriously, like.
You still got through it with good grades.
Yeah, I got through it with good enough grades to go on and do a master's anyway.
And you did that in what was the master? Government.
It was in government, but like the thesis for it, like the thesis was we had to like obviously pick something, and I, funnily enough, obviously picked the EPSN Act, the Education of People with Special Education Needs. So that's what I actually did my research on, because I wanted to see how the implementation of the Act fitted around what they'd hoped the Act would do. Do you know, this whole idea of giving every child in a classroom like a place? Yeah. So that's what I did my research in, because like they said to us, do it in something you're interested in. So.
And what did you find?
That
was it an adequate act? Was it being adhered to by education institutions, or was there gaps?
It was more than adequate, and like what it wanted to set out was like it was reaching for the sun, moon and the stars, but the issue came when the funding was needed. Like they were providing some funding and they have gotten better at it, but at that time they just weren't meeting the funding levels that they needed. Like they needed something that was rights-based with funding behind it, and they just hadn't reached that point yet. But like it kind of backed up what I said, that like, do you know, if the money is there, like the child gets the support, because I mean realistically that's where it comes from, because everyone has a budget to work towards. But like I know when mum and dad were fighting for me to get the SNA, like the very, very first time when I got one, like the visiting teacher at the time said to my dad when it was denied that like, well, you know, people like her don't read and write. Like that was the expectation of a blind person in the 90s, that they just didn't read and write.
Do you know?
But like how different would my life have been if I didn't learn how to do that?
I know. And like, do you know when you're reading and writing? Do you know when you're reading? Are you reading like regularly or are you using Braille?
Do you know what? Everyone asks me that, and that's actually a good question to ask a blind person because everyone's different. I don't read Braille. I never learned how to read it because when I was growing up, they were kind of saying, well, Braille is kind of going out of fashion. So I just learned how to read big text, or like the National Council for the Blind would have been instrumental in like giving my parents like a PC for the house when no one had computers, so that I'd learn to read on that. And like even like my iPad, I used to read books on it. I'm gone into Audibles now because
I use Audibles
it's
myself.
just too much strain on my eyes.
It's more convenient anyway.
Yeah.
I find audiobooks, I listen to it in the car when I'm on the go. I know a good podcast as well you might be interested in.
Is it the two Norries with the sorry?
I think your mum is a fan, isn't she?
Something popped into my head when you were talking about, wouldn't it be great if you had some form of app or something on your phone or something built in, you could take a picture of a page and it would repeat it back to you in audio.
I'm 100%
Apple
sure they do
does that.
something like that already. Yeah.
See, that was the other thing. I was very lucky with the timing of when I was kind of born as well, because like by the time I got into kind of college, like before that you would have had to have an assistant in the room, or you would have had to have like these big massive like screens onto the computer, whereas by the time I got to college, like these kind of technologies, they were in iPhones, they were in iPads. Like, so it was, you basically weren't a finger point. You weren't sticking out from everyone else. Do you know what I mean? So it actually, it's handy, like, because even, do you know, you were saying that about that now, like you can actually on your iPhone take a photo, and I'm not sponsored by Apple. It sounds like I am. It's just that they inbuilt
we'd happily
this
accept
stuff, like,
their sponsorship though.
yeah, and if anyone wants to give me a new iPhone, I'm here. But like with the iPhones now, do you know, like if I do it a lot with instructions for like cooking, if I can't read something, I'll take a photo of it and I can zoom in, or I can highlight it and the screen reader will read it back to me. But like, do you know, like just something so simple, but like it's in the palm of your hand now. Like,
tell me this,
brilliant.
Jessica. We're so advanced now with the medical world.
Yeah.
Is there any possibility that you may be able to get your vision restored, like to any 90, 100% at some point? Because is it happening? Is something like that happening? My question is that really is, are people with your condition getting their sight back because of some miracle operation a doctor is doing somewhere in the world or anything?
As far as I know, people with my condition aren't, because my condition affects how the optic nerves form in the back of your eye. So it's more to do, like, the issue I have is like bringing the message from the eye in through the optic nerve into your brain. Whereas the problem, like some people are like getting their sight back, but I think that seems to be more if they have an issue with like a detached retina or something that's very physical, because mine is related to nerves. No, I haven't seen anything about it. That doesn't mean someone isn't trailing it somewhere. Do you know that kind of way?
Things are transforming at the moment in the medical world. I would never be surprised.
I'd never rule it out. Like,
never. You know, because things are changing so much.
But even if it doesn't happen, you're doing pretty well without, with what you have, and you're doing more than most people. Yeah.
More than pretty well.
But you see, I think that's because like I always felt the need, like when I kind of realised how different I was, I always felt the need to prove myself after that, and I'll run myself into the ground to do it. And it's, do you know what, that's actually probably my biggest flaw, is I will run myself into the ground to prove that I'm either as good or better than someone else, purely because I just feel vulnerable because of it.
You've actually done it already, so you can stop running yourself into the ground, girl. Trust me. You've actually done it already. You know, you've crossed over the miracle boundaries on many, many occasions. So just enjoy life.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. If my wife heard me saying that tonight, she said, "Enjoy life. Get up home, you."
Practice what you preach.
She's like, I haven't seen you all week. No, but on a serious, fair. Well done.
But you know what it is with me as well, like the reason I talk about like what it was like in school and even like the women's health stuff and all that is like I've had my challenges in life, right? And they've knocked me down and I've picked myself back up. But like if me talking about it can help one person either not go through what's happened to me or like have the knowledge to like navigate it in a different way where they don't end up traumatized from something, then I've like done a good in the world, if that kind of makes sense. And that is, I know now that probably sounds pure miscongeniality to some people,
this
but
is
that
exactly
is genuinely where I come from.
This is
like.
exactly what we're doing. So to speak, you're fine because you know what I mean. Your words have power, and your testimony is going to be supportive to others. You mentioned women's health there. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I suppose that's the other way people know me. So like when I came out of college and did my masters and stuff, and then I went working for a few years, and then I lost my job in 2019 that summer, but at that stage I was too sick to go back to work. So basically what had happened was for years before that I'd been in and out of hospital with like unexplained pains in my stomach. Sometimes they'd say it was like my intestines, and then sometimes they'd say it was my ovaries, and then it was this thing and it wasn't this thing. This just went on for years. Like I'd had my appendix out in 2015. It was actually the day I handed in my masters. I don't do things by halves.
I know.
I collapsed. There was an ambulance call for me in UCC, like mortified.
Just
anyway,
after handing in the masters.
Literally, I went back to the library to get my bag, and I just hit the deck. And the next thing I woke up in the Mercy.
Can I tell you my appendix story?
Go on.
When I was in primary school, Knocknaheeny, St. Mary's Underhill, I was, I think I was in 6th class, about 11, and I woke up in the morning and I had a pain in my side. So we were sitting at the breakfast table, myself, my 2 younger sisters and my mum, and I was in pain, right? But my mum didn't believe me. She thought I was trying to get off school. So she sent me to school, and the school sent me home, and I ended up going to the doctor, the GP. He said, go straight to the hospital. I was in hospital for 6 weeks. I was in intensive care. I was in 6 weeks intensive care. My appendix had burst and had infected all my internal organs.
That's what happened to me.
I tell you, I was very, very sick. I was on a drip for so long that they ended up putting a line through my jugular vein to feed me, and I didn't eat for 6 weeks. I was in a bad way that time to me. But anyway, that was my mum's fault.
Mine wasn't my mum's fault.
No. Your mum is a
I have
saint,
to say
sure.
that now because she's here.
Your mum is a saint.
But no, it was more or less something very similar happened to me. Like when I'd had my appendix out, I don't know, did they burst while they were taking them out or something like that anyway. And like they had to do this thing called a washout. But I never thought any more about it. I was in hospital for a week and I was left go home, and I had my blood test afterwards, and like everything looked fine, except that obviously I just had been very sick. So this went on for a few years that I was in and out of hospital. I'd go in with like these things called like ovarian cysts. So your ovaries are like 3 centimeters. That I don't even know if that's 3 centimeters. I'm just guessing.
Far off,
But like I would have cysts that, like, I remember one of them was like 9 centimeters. Like I'd have these huge like cysts. Now they'd eventually burst, and I'd be sent home, and they'd be like, look, it'll settle at some stage, was kind of what I was putting up with. And I think I'd had one operation on my reproductive system, like just to see what was going on. Like I'd asked for one a few times, and the consultant I was under at the time just said, absolutely not. Like there's no need. He actually said to me, go away and have a baby and come back to me, you'll be fine. That's what he said to me. And like, to be honest, like I didn't know if I was going to bother doing that anyway. Because I just had I was in my 20s, like I had no interest.
I know.
Not in having babies anyway. Do you know what I mean? So I had changed consultants, and I had one operation, and after it, and like this just seemed to be what happened after every operation since then. I woke up, I was only supposed to be in for like the day. I ended up having to stay like 2 nights because it had been, I think when the surgeon got in there, she said it was all very aggressive looking. One side of my system was working and the other side wasn't. And the side that wasn't working, the side that was working, 5 weeks later, I had developed a tumour on that side. Now, it was non-cancerous, but it had to be taken out with an emergency surgery, because if it wasn't taken out, it was going to burst through an artery and I would have bled internally.
So is a hysterectomy when they remove the womb?
Yeah, so like those two operations kind of happened within 4 weeks of each other. Then I had one about 4 months later in 2019, and then the hysterectomy was in October 2019. So I kind of had like 4 operations with the big one within kind of 13 months. The hysterectomy was like, so they take out your womb, but like mine was like a thing called a radical one. So they took out my remaining ovary, which was the one that wasn't working anymore because the other one was gone. They took out my cervix, thing that you have your smears done on, and they took around kind of all the ligaments and everything around it.
Does that affect your hormonal profile in terms of estrogen and testosterone production?
Yeah, because you see, your ovaries are what make your hormones, like for women. So like you basically wake up and like the hormone, I call it like the hormone factory in your body is gone.
And would you ever consider doing HRT?
I'm on HRT.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. So like I had my surgery in London.
Sorry. What's HRT?
Hormone replacement therapy.
Like
So
what
you
Joe
basically
Rogan and them is doing,
just-
Oh, it's like
but for women with estrogen.
Okay.
Because if you take the testosterone out of your body now, your mood will go low, your libido would be gone.
You'll be exhausted.
You'll be exhausted. Like you need that. So it'd be the same for the woman. And what happens then is when sometimes women, when they go through the menopause, when the estrogen is going low in the body, sometimes they'll go on HRT so they don't have all those negative side effects. But for somebody so young like you,
Yeah.
like you'd want the HRT, like.
Like it's different for someone when it happens some kind of in the normal years, like in their 40s or their 50s, because like it slowly goes down and their body kind of
And it's
gets
natural.
used to it. Yeah. And like they can make a decision then if they want the HRT. Like I know now there's a movement to say everyone should be using it. Personally, I think they should, but it's everyone's own choice. Like some people don't want to. But like for me then, like if you literally wake up without ovaries, like what a shock to the system. Do you know what I mean? So it's different when it's surgical, because there's no kind of slow chance to kind of lower it.
One day you've a
Just
full hormonal profile, then the next day you've none.
Yeah.
And
And even, do you know, you're on about testosterone there. I never knew that like my ovaries made testosterone. I've only recently started taking testosterone supplements. And like that now, it changed like I used to be exhausted after work to the point where I'd come in and I wouldn't eat and I'd get into bed, I'd sleep for 12 hours, I'd get up and I was still tired.
But sure, even estrogen, which is
that's the main one. Like,
that's a vital hormone in a male in terms of like the cognitive development and, you know, the brain side of it, as well as you know, we're a chemical machine that's very finely balanced, and one counteracts with the other. It's just in women, it's the more prominent one is estrogen, and for men it's testosterone. But what's your quality of life like at the moment?
it's much better than it was before the operation. Like before the operation, like I don't actually remember most of the summer before that because I was on oxycodone, morphine. Like
One second.
any drugs.
What was it like? What was it like taking oxycodone and the morphine? Pretty good. But
do you know what? It was
make
grand until I had to detox.
I know,
Exactly,
that's
yeah.
what I'm saying. Like
That was horrific. That was the worst experience I've ever had.
You're talking about the equivalent of heroin in a tablet. Like
I know.
that's what it is like. What
I
was it
didn't know
like?
that when I took
and
it.
pure.
Oh, unreal.
Absolutely
Pharmaceutical grade.
Do you know what? I was saying this to someone the other day. Like, it was like, do you know when you take it, now obviously I didn't realise this the first time I took it. Like, genuinely, like, I'm not like very well insulated that I wouldn't know things, but like I genuinely thought like if a doctor's giving you this, it's safe to take.
Yeah.
Like, do you know when you hear people say I chased the dragon? I think with Oxy you chase the dragon, you find the dragon, your best friends.
Oh, yeah.
It's the weirdest, it gives you the weirdest feeling in the world.
Look at the trust that we have in having our doctors. Look
Yeah.
at the trust that the Americans have in their doctors, that they were giving you OxyContin out because people had a pain in their toes, and half of the country then got caught up in them.
Like,
But I think for maybe...
I was horrified when I saw that. Now, to be fair, the pain I was in, you were talking, you know, when they say 1 to 10,
Yeah,
I was hitting
that's what
10.
I was going to say. It's
So it
for
was
like
warranted.
if you have a hysterectomy or you have cancer or if you have something severe, you can understand why a doctor would use that specific tool available to him. The problem comes whereas mild
when it's
to moderate pain
being thrown out.
and people get oxys.
And it's not given out that easily back here in Ireland.
No, it isn't.
It's what we're saying here is
You always have to err on the side of caution with it though, because you had withdrawals coming off it.
Like, I think if I knew how bad the withdrawals were going to be from it, I don't think I would have taken it, because did it help the pain? I don't know if it helped the pain, but I know it kept me more quiet about the pain, if that makes sense. Like, I slept a lot. And like there's a lot kind of up in the air about it here as well. Like, I had no access to a pain consultant after the surgery because I had to go private. So I had to go to England to have the hysterectomy. So like, obviously I couldn't find a pain consultant when I come home in time to detox me properly. My own GP, God love him, had to do it. And I don't know how he did it.
How long did that detox take?
2 weeks, I think.
2 weeks. And how long beyond the...
I was on it. I'd been on it for like 9 months before that.
That's a long time.
Yeah. But like, they actually said to me, I remember when I went in to try and figure out the detox, because I stopped taking them. That was the problem. Yeah. I just stopped because I thought it was like Salpidine, that you could just stop taking it. Or like, do you know, even like Tramadol, that you could just stop taking it, and it wasn't.
I actually took Oxy for my back. I literally couldn't put on, we talked about this before, I couldn't put on my socks to go to work. Yeah. And a family member had Oxy because they were after damaging their back very badly as well, and I took a few of them going to work. And I took them for a while, not too long, and I had the worst come down. Like, I've took all forms of drugs.
Yeah.
Right, and alcohol, and been on benders for weeks and weeks. I was in a really, really bad place after trying to come down off these things. Like, I swear, I was having these nightmares. I thought I was going to die and everything. Yeah. You know, it was like I was falling from heights and all this.
And it feels so real. And you get these pulses, these feelings of like, it's like someone sent an electric shock through your body. Like, it's horrific. Yeah. And like, don't even... like all of it, like the jitters, it was the worst detox. Like, I'm not someone who's a lot of experience with detox, but I
have a lot of experience, and I can corroborate what you're saying.
The most horrific drug I've ever taken.
It's horrible, life. But any opiate, any like people addicted to Norries Plus or anything like that, and heroin and methadone, it's more or less the same withdrawal. It's the shivers, the cold, the craving, the insomnia, the not being able to eat or whatever.
And I think like on top of that, what I was dealing with as well is like when like just before I had the operation, when I had the scans and stuff done, they told me that like I was past the point of having IVF as well. And at that stage I decided I wanted to at least keep my eggs. So I was dealing with like all this traumatic emotional stuff. And then then I have this drug that like numbs the pain and numbs my brain.
Have you got your eggs frozen?
No, I was too late.
Oh, that's a bollocks now, wouldn't it?
Yeah, bollocks is to put it nicely.
Yeah, I know. But you know what? I've no kids either. And you can have a great life without kids. And it's not the end of the world for you. I know, like, it's the most natural thing in the world as well.
I don't think I'd have... You see, this is the thing, right? I actually don't think I would have had them anyway.
It's just the option was taken from you.
Exactly. That's the difference.
It's like, it's not the end of the world either. If you ever did want to have a child, you could very easily adopt a child as well.
Exactly. And they'd be lucky to have you.
Exactly.
Like, I'd love to foster. That's like my 5-year goal is like to get properly settled in Dublin, and like to actually like do like maybe emergency fostering. So I'd give like even newborns or like small kids that have just been taken, like give them a good kind of soft landing for a week or two.
Are you living in Dublin now?
Yeah, full time. Like, I suppose like that's the other side of it. That was one of the things I really had to do afterwards, was leave, because it's actually an awful thing to say about your own city, and I love my city, and I'm like Cork through and through, like to the point where like I actually have the Cork City FC crest on my door at work, but like I had to go because...
What's work these days, Jessica?
Work is I'm a political advisor to Martin Kenny, the Sinn Féin TD for Justice.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, so like we work on a lot of like everything that's in the justice profile. So you'd be going everything from like civil law, like defamation, things like that, to like the granting of the visas now for like the refugees from the Ukraine, things like that. And then it also goes all into criminal law and just even the rehabilitative side of law. It's like, lads, it's so interesting.
Where's his constituency?
Sligo. Sligo and Leitrim.
And you're in Dublin.
And I'm in Dublin from Cork.
Jesus,
do
an
you work
all-Ireland approach.
Does he come down to Dublin or do you work through Zoom and all this stuff?
So like obviously like this is post COVID, so I don't know what would have been different before COVID. I only like started working with him last year. So he's in Dublin like 3 days a week that the doll sits, and then unless there's something specific he has to be in Dublin for, he's in his constituency all the time.
You were about to tell us there where you had to leave Cork.
Yeah, do you know what? I just had to leave because, like, obviously, like, all this was going on for me. Like, I was dealing with all this traumatic, like, changes to my life and changes to my body and all this. And, like, afterwards, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, which, like, that's something I thought people only got in the battlefield. Genuinely, like, I thought people in Afghanistan, like, who were in a war zone got it. I didn't know that you could get it from being sick.
Did you listen to our podcast with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk?
No.
He was the leading
I should have said yeah, shouldn't I?
Yeah, your mum did in the background. Yeah. He's the leading expert in PTSD in the world. He was the first person to trial Prozac with Vietnam vets, and you should go and have a listen to it.
Yeah.
What he found in these trials with working with people with PTSD is the Vietnam veterans obviously had post-traumatic stress, but the people that had these life experiences, they weren't at war, but they had regular life experiences, but they had the same symptoms as the people in. So the body reacts the same to
that's
trauma
the thing I learned
regardless
about
of the event.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And you know what? Like, it kind of takes you back as well. Like, I learned more about PTSD. Like, obviously, when I was diagnosed with it, when I spoke to my doctors about it and stuff. But I was also able to learn about it because I was able to read about it. Like, again, imagine what would have happened if I couldn't read. Do you know what I mean? Like, that blows my mind sometimes, like.
It brings you back to the personal growth aspect of education. It's very important for anybody. You know, I always emphasise this in any meeting when somebody just gets recovery into their life and they might not have had an education, by going back and doing a small, simple course where they're just doing the basics in English or whatever, you know, and work your way up, because education is the key to understanding why things happen and understanding yourself.
Yeah.
And it's like you just said it. You just absolutely just said it there. Like, if you didn't know how to read because of the SNAs and getting the help that you required, you wouldn't have learned too much about PTSD and all the other stuff, you know, and I think it's very important to mention that.
I'm going to close it up there now, but I just wanted to say, I just want to give a shout out to all the Lioness mammies out there looking after their kids, and all the SNAs and all the other supports that help support people through education. Just plans for the future. Do you know that Martin Kenny, the TD?
Yeah.
Do you know if Sinn Féin got into power in the morning, do you reckon he'd get the portfolio for justice?
I can't ask me that.
But I'm just
like, the presumption is that he would.
Yeah, it would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, like that's because he's like the shadow, like.
Thomas Gould is a spokesperson for drugs and recovery.
Exactly.
It would make sense he would get the Minister for State with responsibility for drugs. Owen O'Brien would be housing and Per Starty would be
finance.
Exactly. So when you get into power, put us in touch with Martin Kenny. And we get him on the podcast.
He actually listens to the podcast because I said to him last week, I was like, I'm doing the Two Norries podcast now, so I actually won't be back in Dublin till Monday night. And he was saying, the Two Norries, they're having you on the show.
Hi, Martin. Martin, have a shout with Michelle O'Neill, will I? You know, Michelle, congratulations to Sinn Féin and the successes up north. Michelle O'Neill was born in Cork. I know she's the first minister in Northern Ireland. So
a blonde Cork woman is the first minister.
A beautiful blonde Cork woman.
How long is she living in Belfast?
Years. But she was born in Cork.
Yeah, she's born from I think.
So she's the first minister up there at the moment.
Yeah, it's the first time.
If they go into power sharing.
It's the first time the Nationalist Party has been the dominant party. Sinn Féin won more votes than the Protestant parties for the first time ever. So look, we're going off on a tangent.
Yeah,
but
we are.
Martin Kenny, give us a show, and Michelle O'Neill, we'd love to have you on. It was a pleasure talking to you, Jessica.
Yeah, you too.
Best of luck with everything in the future.
Thanks, guys.
And best of luck with Sinn Féin and everybody there.
And it's amazing listening to you, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to get a lot from your story
I hope so. Can I plug my Instagram before I leave?
Of course you
Of
can.
course.
Yes.
For people that want to get in touch with you,
I run it's kind of like a support page. It's called surviving_hysterectomy. It's on Instagram. So like what I did was I charted the whole journey about like leaving for the operation, getting the diagnosis, getting the HRT afterwards, all that. And I have some, like I try, like to be fair, I keep work out of it because I know everyone's politics is different, you know, that kind of way. But if anyone wants to kind of have a look at that, work away.
it's always good to keep the politics out of it, because then we isolate ourselves from
Exactly.
people that would be otherwise allies.
Yeah.
And we always try to keep the politics out of this too, because it's for everybody. What you're doing is for everybody, and what we're doing is for everybody.
Yeah.
And the politics is for other podcasts and other
Exactly.
Instagram. So it's been a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you. And you've raised a lovely woman. Fair play to you. God bless.
Thanks a million. Bye-bye.